بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. الحمد لله حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا كريم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. Welcome all to this exclusive lecture about the new year that we're about to commence. And what I mean by the new year, when I say the word new year, you might think, well, we've already gotten through the new year and we're actually several months through the year, and we're awaiting the next year. We're awaiting 2018. But what I really mean by the new year over here is the new Hijri year, okay? Because of the fact that in our times we conduct ourselves in offices, at work, and other places, primarily through the Gregorian calendar, we sometimes lose track of our Islamic calendar, the Hijri calendar, right? And it's quite important for us as Muslims to continuously connect ourselves with this particular calendar. And the reason for that is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished for us to be connected to this calendar. The difference is, one of the two calendars, there's a number of differences, but one of those differences, one of the two calendars is based on the solar year, and the other calendar is based on the lunar year, okay? So now, of course, when there's a lunar year, it's obviously going to be slightly shorter than the solar year, and that's the case with the Hijri calendar. It's obviously a slight bit shorter, a few 10 odd days shorter every single year than the solar calendar, the Gregorian calendar, which we use 2017, 18, 16, 15, before that, and so forth, right? So we are now about to commence 1439 of the lunar Hijri calendar that was marked by the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ to Al-Madinah. And the reason why I stress the importance of recognizing the differences between these two calendars is because in Islam, our calculation of the year, okay, the yearly cycle is done based on the lunar calendar. However, our calculation of every single thing related to the day is based on the sun, based on the solar system, right? Based on the day and the night and so forth. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us two signs, and He actually tells us of this in more than one verse. One of those verses is in Surah Al-Isra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ آيَتَيْنِ, and we made the night and the day two signs, okay? So He gave us two signs. And in another verse, Allah expands on this a bit more, saying, هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ ضِيَاءً وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا وَقَدَّرَهُ مَنَازِلَ لِتَعْلَمُوا عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ وَالْحِسَابَ. He is the one who has made the Shams, the sun, very, very powerful light. ضِيَاءً. He's given the sun a very, very powerful, strong, sharp light. Okay? وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا. And He's given the qamar, the moon, a very soft light. And then He says, وَقَدَّرَهُ مَنَازِلَ. And He made for it specific phases that it goes through. Sometimes it's a full moon, sometimes it's a half moon, sometimes it's a crescent, and so on and so forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Allah has made for it different manazil. لِتَعْلَمُوا عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ وَالْحِسَابِ. And the reason why He's done that is so that you know the عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ وَالْحِسَابِ, so that you recognize the number of days, years, right? So you know which year we're in, whether we're in 1432, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or perhaps, as we're going to be commencing very soon, 9. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the moon in that way, where it goes through different phases, where it is essentially very small or barely noticeable by the naked eye in the beginning of the month, and then it appears gradually until in the middle of the month it becomes fully apparent, and then it slowly decreases in size as well, again, until it disappears altogether. So Allah says the reason why He's done that to the moon is so that you know the numbers of the years that you happen to be in, okay? So if you notice, there's a difference between the sun and the moon in this regard, right? The sun, it's pretty much the same, at least to the naked eye, throughout the year, right? So you can't really tell the difference in terms of which part of the month you're in. But Allah says, I've made the moon such, I've given it manazil, so that you're able to tell the year apart. You're able to tell that difference. Wal-hisab, and also so you're able to calculate what? You're able to calculate all of the things that you need to calculate, including your fast, including the breaking of your fast, including your hajj, including your zakat. All of these things are based around the lunar calendar, right? Including everything that you may vow. If someone says, I'm going to vow to fast for 1 year, where are you going to decide how much that 1 year is? Is it going to be solar or lunar? Naturally, it goes to the lunar, because everything in Islam is generally conducted within the lunar calendar. Similarly, expiations, a number of expiations related to where time is involved. Similarly, the iddah of a woman after she's divorced, or after she's divorced. So how do we calculate that iddah? It's obviously going to also be calculated by the lunar calendar as well. Within this lies the importance of us in interacting with this particular calendar, with the lunar calendar. And another factor is that it is part of our heritage, right? And Allah again and again speaks of this. When He says, in another verse, He says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you, how come there are so many different phases of the moon? So the Prophet when he's being asked, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies, He says, قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. Tell the people that this is mawaqit, this is your timings, right? Wal-hajj, this is the timings for the people, and also this is how you recognize the dates for al-hajj as well, okay? So there is a significance of us connecting ourselves to this particular calendar. And within this calendar, within the Hijri calendar, within the lunar calendar, within the days that we know based on the Hijri months, Muharram, Safar, Rabi'ul Awwal, and so on, all the way till all 12 of them, right? Of course, there are 12 months in both calendars, but as I said, the size is different because the lunar calendar is shorter, okay? So, in terms of these months, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told us, Allah told us through the Prophet, اُطْلُبُوا الْخَيْرَ دَهْرَكُمْ. Go and look for the goodness throughout your entire year, okay? وَتَعَرَّضُوا لِنَفَحَاتِ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّكُمْ. And look around for the gifts of your Lord as well. So notice what He's saying, look for the goodness throughout the year. Sometimes we believe that the goodness in the year is simply in Ramadan, okay? And the goodness in the year for those people who are going for Hajj is in Hajj as well. And other than that, we have no other seasons in which we have goodness to seek from Allah Azza wa Jal. Specific times in which Allah has given more reward for certain things over other times, for instance. But that's not necessarily the case. The reality is that there are specific times throughout the year that Allah has specified, for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed great amounts of reward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His messenger tells us of this, saying, اُطْلُبُوا الْخَيْرَ دَهْرَكُمْ. Look around for the good throughout the entire year. وَتَعَرَّضُوا لِنَفَحَاتِ رَبِّكُمْ. And look for those gifts. So what I'm trying to do today, inshaAllah ta'ala, is to tell you and I, and remind you and I of the gifts of Allah in the month of Al-Muharram, okay? There's a number of gifts that Allah has placed in this month. Just as Allah has placed certain gifts and certain functions that a person can do throughout every single month of the year, Muharram is no different. In fact, Muharram is the start of the year. So you'd imagine that just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed some of the best days in the end of the year, and that's Dhul Hijjah, that's when people went for Hajj, and that's when everybody was talking about the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah and so on and so forth. If Allah had placed great reward towards the end of the year, naturally Allah will also place great reward towards the beginning, because Islam generally encourages us to ensure that we are doing ihsan, goodness throughout, but specifically and most definitely in the beginning of our actions and at the end of our actions. We are even more further encouraged to do ihsan. So if at the end of the year Allah has placed great reward, that's in Dhul Hijjah, in the Hajj and the season in general, then obviously Allah will have great reward also for us within the month of Muharram as well, right? So where is that great reward? Allah's Messenger ﷺ told us in the tradition. He said, أفضل الصيام بعد الشهر رمضان شهر الله الذي تدعونه المحرم. Okay, or شهر الله الذي تدعونه المحرم. وأفضل الصلاة بعد الفريضة قيام الليل. The Prophet ﷺ said that the best of fasting, the best of fast, after the Shahr of Ramadan, after the month of Ramadan, is the month which you all call the month of Muharram. And the best of salah, the best of prayer after your obligatory prayer, of course, is the prayer that you pray at nighttime. Okay? So notice the Prophet is drawing a correlation here. He's drawing a correlation between the night prayer and between the fasting of the month of Al-Muharram. Okay? This is really important for us to notice and understand that there's a bit of a correlation between fasting the month of Muharram and praying the night prayer, the Qiyamul Layl. Okay? Why is that, or what is that correlation? How do we try to reconcile, or how do we try to understand this particular collection of two different things, two different distinct concepts? How do we understand that? Like this. There are certain fasts and there are certain prayers which are connected to other obligatory prayers, or that are connected to specified occasions and times and so on and so forth. For instance, when you go and pray Dhuhr, before Dhuhr there's Sunnah, and after Dhuhr there's Sunnah as well. Similarly, when you pray Fajr, before Fajr there is Sunnah, and after before Fajr there's Sunnah, and after Fajr of course there's no Sunnah. There is Salatul Duha after the sun rises, the length of a spear, as it's known, right? About 15 minutes after Fajr time, that's when Salatul Duha time comes. So there are some prayers which are connected to a specific salah. They're voluntary prayers, but they're connected to another prayer, okay? Like the Sunan before Dhuhr, like the Sunan after Dhuhr, like the Sunan before Fajr, like the Sunan after Maghrib, like the Sunnah after Isha, and so on and so forth, right? So these Sunnahs are the best Sunnahs to do. And on top of this whole list is, of course, Witr. Witr is the best prayer that you can pray that is not obligatory, okay? Now, as for prayer in general that is not related to a specific time, which time is the best time for you to choose to pray? Like, let's say you just want to pray some nawafil. The best time to pray nawafil is the nighttime. Similarly, there are some fasts that Allah has placed before the month of Ramadan, before the obligatory fast, and after the month of Ramadan, kind of like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed Sunnah before Dhuhr and Sunnah after Dhuhr, right? So those fasts are considered very, very encouraged because they're related to this actual obligatory fast almost. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ used to fast in Sha'ban so much so that some would say that it's as if he's fasted the entire month. And the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to fast after Ramadan in Shawwal as well for 6 days. But if you want to talk about the best season to just voluntarily fast, other than those which are correlated to obligations, then the best season for fasting is the season we're about to commence, insha'Allah ta'ala, at Maghrib time today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And that is the month of Al-Muharram. That is the month of Al-Muharram. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, أَفْضَلُ الصِّيَامِ بَعْدَ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ. The best of fast after the month of Ramadan is the fast of the month which you call Al-Muharram. And Allah's Messenger called this Shahrullah, the month of Allah. Keep that in mind, okay? The month of Allah. Now, whenever the Prophet, or whenever Allah Himself attributes something to Allah Azza wa Jal Himself, that means that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is trying to tell us that this is a very magnificent, this is a very, very magnificent matter, whatever it is that's being discussed. So if Allah is talking about the she-camel that is found in the Quran, Allah says, Naqatullah, right? Similarly, when Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala wants to tell us how grand or how serious the fire is, Allah tells us it's Narullah. Similarly, when Allah wants to tell us the magnificence of the house of Allah, Allah tells us that it is the Bayt of Allah, right? The Prophet ﷺ tells us also that it is the house of Allah Azza wa Jal, i.e. this is a very serious place. It's not a place where it's a very, very magnificent place. So similarly, this month here is a very magnificent, this month is a very virtuous, this month is a very great month. For that reason, Allah's Prophet ﷺ said, Shahrullah, the month of Allah, الذي تدعونه المحرم, the one that you all like to call al-Muharram. So it's the month of Allah. Now that we know that this is the month of Allah, let's look at the one deed that the Prophet ﷺ singled out for this month. He said the best of fast after the fast of Ramadan is the fast of this month. And we know that the Prophet told us that the fast is also a deed which is the reward of which is directly designated to Allah. So Allah's Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah said that as-sawmu li wa ana ajzi bihi, that the fast is for me. Okay, so he attributed it to himself. So the month is attributed to Allah Azza wa Jal. The deed which Allah had designated for this month is also attributed to Allah Azza wa Jal. And hence the type of reward that a person will be getting for fasting during this month is definitely and of a surety very, very, very great. And Hasan al-Basri, he used to say that Allah Azza wa Jal started off the year with a haram month, meaning with a sacred month. And similarly, Allah finished off the year with a sacred month. And there is not a single month after Ramadan. فَلَيْسَ شَهْرٌ فِي السَّنَةِ بَعْدَ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ أَعْظَمُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. There's not a month in the entire year after Ramadan, which happens to be, as a whole month, not specific days, which happens to be greater near Allah Azza wa Jal than Al-Muharram, of course, after, as I said, Ramadan. And that's something that we found also in a hadith in As-Sunan Al-Kubra, As-Sunan Al-Kubra of An-Nasa'i, that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, أَيُّ اللَّيْلِ خَيْرٌ, which part of the night, O Prophet of Allah, which part of the night, O Prophet of Allah, is the best? وَأَيُّ الْأَشْهُرِ أَفْضَلُ, and which part, or which one of the months, O Prophet of Allah ﷺ, happens to be the best? So the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُ اللَّيْلِ جَوْفُهُ, the best of the night happens to be the middle of the night, okay? And the best of the months happens to be the month which you all call Al-Muharram. So we've now decided that the best of the months after the month of Ramadan to fast as a season, kind of like the best part of the day to pray is nighttime, the best of the seasons to fast is this particular month, which is the Al-Muharram, which is the first month of the Hijri calendar. And this particular month, as it commences, it's a very, very important time of the year, because this is where everybody's starting their lives all over again, pretty much, right? It's the beginning of the year. It is a time, by the way, this is a time of reflection, because you have to think about the fact that a year of your life has passed. It's not necessarily a time of celebration. That's not what we're calling to, but it is a time of importance in terms of reflection. So we reflect about the fact that an entire year of our life has gone. And what exactly is it that we've done within this particular year that has come to pass? And that's why Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he mentioned some lines of poetry which are very beautiful. I'll read parts of it to you. He says that, and he's quoting, he says, قَطَعْتَ شُهُورَ الْعَامِ لَهْوًا وَغَفْلَةً وَلَمْ تَحْتَرِمْ فِي مَا أَتَيْتَ الْمُحَرَّمَ, that you ended up going through the entire year. شُهُورَ الْعَامِ لَهْوًا وَغَفْلَةً, you went through the entire year and you were occupied and heedless and so on and so forth, and you didn't think of what? You didn't think of the fadl, the virtue of the month of Muharram. Neither did you think of the virtues of Rajab as well. And you didn't give the due rights of Rajab. فَلَا رَجَبًا وَفَيْتَ فِيهِ بِحَقِّهِ, and neither did you fast the month of fast in the best of ways. You didn't think about fasting the month of fast and ensuring that all of the obligations of the fast and all of the voluntary deeds in the month of fast are all done perfectly. And neither did you think of the 10 days of the Hijjah. You didn't think much of it. I didn't think much of it. He's addressing all of us here. And he says you weren't standing up the nights of these particular days, right? The 10 days of the Hijjah. فَهَلْ لَكَ أَن تَمْحُ الذُّنُوبَ بِحَبْرَةٍ. So why don't you go ahead and at least have one tear come out of your eyes? And let some tears flow during this particular moment out of remorse and sadness of the fact that you wasted a year of seasons, and now that you're going into this new year, وَتَسْتَقْبِلَ الْعَامَ الْجَدِيدَ بِتَوْبَةٍ لَعَلَّكَ أَن تَمْحُو بِهَا مَا تَقَدَّمَ. And then you greet this new year of yours with a new dress of iman, of a faith, and of tawbah, so that you have repented from all of the sins and all of the shortcomings of the past year, and you start pretty much fresh. You start a new season, a new chapter within your life. And one of the best ways to start that chapter, of course, is to start it off with fasting. And fasting is something that the Prophet ﷺ said there is nothing that is similar to it in reward. Why? Because the messenger told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the fast is for me, as we already explained, and I'm the one who gives the reward. I am the one who designates a reward without any limitations for this fast. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Abu Umama, alayka bis-sawm, go ahead and fast. Why? فَإِنَّهُ لَا عَدْلَ لَهُ. Because this fast actually has no adl, it has nothing similar to it. Meaning in reward, there's nothing that can par up to it, nothing that can match up to it. So when Abu Umama, listen to this hadith, when Abu Umama heard this from the Prophet ﷺ, O Prophet of Allah, there's nothing like this, there's nothing like fasting in terms of the amount of reward that you get out of it. He and his family used to regularly fast, to a degree that the entire year in their house you wouldn't even see smoke burning except when there happened to be guests. So the neighbors, now of course they didn't have the type of houses we have today, so if their neighbors saw smoke coming out of different portions of their house, they would immediately know that these people have some guests over, right? Because they're burning some fire to cook some food, and so on and so forth. So this hadith should move us at least to fast a few days during this beautiful month, in which the fasting is of course very, very encouraged. And there's one specific day which we'll talk about in which the fast is even more so encouraged. But the entire month is also encouraged. Many people used to fast the entire month of Muharram, and it's enough for us to at least get some of the virtue. Obviously, because of the type of lives we have, it's hard for us to make the adjustments to be able to fit it in an entire month of fast, or maximize the benefits. But at least we ensure that we are able to fast مثلا Mondays and Thursdays. At least we can do the weekends. At least we can do certain days that we select for ourselves in this beautiful season, the season of virtue, the season in which fasting. By the way, when it comes to Qiyamul Layl, the night prayer, we discussed that already, that since prayer has a certain section of the day in which prayer is the best, and that is the night prayer, similarly Allah has designated a section of the year in which fasting is the best, in addition to, of course, the obligatory fast. And those 2 months which are related to the obligatory month, Ramadan before Sha'ban, after Shawwal. But in addition to those 3, the best season to fast is when? Al-Muharram. Okay, in terms of Qiyamul Layl, it comes every single night. So if you miss it tonight, you're going to be able to catch it tomorrow. If you miss it tomorrow, you're going to be able to catch it the day after. But Al-Muharram only comes once a year. So you have to try to make the most of the month while it is still around, and while you are, insha'Allah ta'ala, still around and in good health. Now the one day in which fasting is even further encouraged is that day, which is the day of Ashura. Okay? The day of Ashura. The day of Ashura, which literally comes from the word Ashara, the 10th day of this particular beautiful month of Al-Muharram, was a day in which it's also reported that some of the other prophets, such as Nuh alayhi salam and such as Musa alayhi salam as well, they used to fast this particular day as well. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also fasted this particular day, the day of Ashura, the 10th day of Al-Muharram. In fact, he used to fast this day even before he moved to Medina. And when I say that, What I mean by that is that he used to fast this even before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had obliged upon the ummah to fast the month of Ramadan. So the Prophet ﷺ was fasting Ashura even before he had traveled to Medina. Okay? And then when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, he also continued to fast this. However, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the ruling of fasting the month of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ, then he told people that it is up to you. If you'd like to fast, you can fast. And if you don't, then you don't have to fast anymore. So after that, the Prophet ﷺ didn't command people. Before that, after he moved to Medina, that is, he would essentially command people. In addition to the fact that he was fasting before he moved to Medina, when he got to Medina, he was also now commanding people to go ahead and hold this fast as well, as in his companions. Some of the scholars, they said it was actually obligatory to fast the day of Ashura for the Sahaba essentially. Some said it was mustahab, very, very encouraged, but others said it was obligatory to fast the day of Ashura. But when the obligation of Ramadan came, then Allah's Messenger ﷺ said to the people, whoever wants to fast can do so. Whoever doesn't want to fast doesn't have to, but still it remained an encouraged fast. And I'll tell you the great favor of Allah Azza wa Jal upon the Ummah for placing a great virtue and a great reward within this fast, inshaAllah ta'ala, just in a little while. So hang in there. But before we go there, the Prophet ﷺ was walking in Medina. And as the Prophet ﷺ was walking in Medina, he noticed that some of the people from amidst the Jews were fasting the day of Ashura. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to see. Remember, he already knew about Ashura because even Quraysh had said that they themselves used to fast. Ashura as well in al-Jahiliyyah, before in the pre-Islamic times. But he wanted to just see what the Yahud have to say, what the Jews had to say. So he asked them, "Ma hadha al-yawm alladhi tasumunahu?" What's this day that you all fast as well? So they said to him, "Hadha yawmun azim." This is a very great day. Anjallahu fihi Musa wa qawmah. Allah saved Musa alayhi salam and the people of Musa alayhi salam, as in the Israelites. وَأَغْرَقَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَقَوْمَهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed for the qawm of Fir'aun, for the people of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh himself to drown as well. So Musa alayhi salam had fasted this day out of thanks and gratefulness to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we also fast this day out of gratefulness to Allah Azza wa Jal. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ وَأَوْلَى بِمُوسَى مِنْكُمْ. We are even more worthy of Musa alayhi salam than you. فَصَامَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ وَأَمَرَ بِصِيَامِهِ. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam then ended up fasting this particular day, as in continuing that fast, which he had already started prior to that. And also he commanded others to go ahead and fast on this particular day as well. So it's a great day, a great season to fast. And all of Muharram is the season to fast, but specifically the day of Ashura is a day in which the Prophet ﷺ had specifically encouraged. Now another thing that one can do as well, and this is something that the Prophet ﷺ wanted to do, but the Prophet ﷺ passed away before he could do it. And that was in the final year of his life. He said, when the next year comes, I'm going to fast the 9th day as well. Okay? Now, notice that the Prophet ﷺ, that means that in the previous years, he didn't fast the 9th day. Okay? So that means that likely the Prophet wasn't fasting the whole month. Even though if someone wishes to fast the whole month, that can be done and there's no problems with that. But from this particular hadith, we get the hint that he would fast most of the month and not the entire month, because he said that I'm going to fast the 9th day of Muharram from the next year, from the subsequent year. And why is that? The Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to do this because of the fact that, of course, it becomes safer in this way, right? This way, there's no way you can miss the day of Ashura. And also, so that he would go against the practice of the Jews of just fasting on the one day. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ said, I'll fast the day before, And in some traditions, the day before and the day after as well. Okay, so the 9th, 10th, and the 11th as well. This is a little bit about the fast of Ashura. And the fast of Ashura has great reward along with it as well. And so we should definitely hold this fast. It's a kafara. It's an expiation from it for an entire year of sin, as the Prophet ﷺ had exclaimed and told us of in a tradition as well. One of the other things that one can do during this particular season is, this is something that some scholars, they say that the traditions related to it, the ahadith related to it are weak. But other scholars, they say no, the ahadith related to it are strong. Okay? And what's that? That is to encourage generosity on the day of Ashura. Okay? In terms of, allowing your family, for example, to eat as much as they want, take them out for a dinner or so on and so forth, and those type of things. Now, just to be clear, when we say Ashura, you're going to be fasting, how are you going to take your family out for dinner? Because after Maghrib, the day finishes, right? So if you want to practice this sunnah, which is to be generous on the day of Ashura, specifically your family, okay, then you would have to do that on the 9th night, after the Maghrib. So you'd fast the 9th, and after the Maghrib, you ensure that you have a good meal for your family. If you want to give some presents, sure, that's fine as well. All of that is khair. Now, as I said, the hadith goes as such. مَنْ وَسَّعَ عَلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ يَوْمَ عَاشُورَى. And in some traditions, مَنْ وَسَّعَ عَلَىٰ عِيَالِهِ. Whoever is generous, whoever makes, gives to his family on the day of Ashura. On the day of Ashura. Family, in one tradition, meaning wives and children, and another tradition, very clearly, children as well. مَنْ وَسَّعَ عَلَىٰ عِيَالِهِ يَوْمَ عَاشُورَى وَسَّعَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ سَائِرَ سَنَتِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the rest of his year very comfortable, very easy, and so forth. Now, I go back and say some scholars, they believe this tradition is weak. Actually, in terms of the muhaddithin, many scholars believe that this tradition is weak. But there's two things. A, some of the scholars, they do say that this tradition is authentic. And B, the fuqaha of al-Islam, including the Hanafiya, the Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya, and the Hanabila, all of them agree that it is a sunnah for a person to be generous to his family during this particular day. Okay? So though the chains of some of the traditions are weak, and some people very extensively try to link this to this practice to some deviant groups and so on and so forth, but to be honest, that attempt to link this practice to deviant groups is a false attempt, and there's no substantial information that we have in order for us to accept and validate this claim. Okay, because we have these traditions and we have Sunni scholars from the Hanafiya, the Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya, and the Hanabila, all of them agreeing that this particular practice is a sunnah. So how can we then attribute it to some foreign groups, to Sunni Islam? Sunni Islam comprises the four schools of Islamic thought when it comes to fiqh, when it comes to rulings such as it is mustahab to do this, such as it's appreciated, or it is encouraged to do this, or it is discouraged to do that. So you go back to Sunni sources, and the Sunni sources include, and the foremost of the sources are the four madhahib, the Hanafiya, the Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya, and the Hanabila. And as I said, all of them agree that it is a good practice to be generous on this specific day to your family, and that this hadith is applicable because A, it is related to fada'il al-ahmal. A, it's related to virtuous deeds. Now, when it comes to virtuous deeds, you don't have to be as rigorous in terms of hadith authentication. That's number one. Number two, there are some scholars who've actually authenticated the tradition as well, such as Imam as-Suyuti. So considering those two factors in the four madhahib, we say that it is an encouraged practice for a person to, take some time and take, for instance, the family out for a generous meal, at the ninth night after Maghrib, so he does it during the day of Ashura, or on the day of Ashura itself. A person perhaps is generous in other ways to the family, such as presents, or maybe someone gives money to their family. Now, this tradition is graded as one of the keys of rizq. Okay, one of the keys of sustenance from Allah Azza wa Jalla. So if you want sustenance and you practice this, I can almost assure you that you will feel a difference throughout your year in terms of how much grant you have from Allah Azza wa Jalla, and how much financial help you have from Allah. How do I say I can assure you? Because many Sahaba and Tabi'een and other scholars and other people who practice this, they all said, we tried it and it worked. Okay? Amongst them are actually Sahaba as well. Amongst them is Jabir from amongst the Sahaba. Amongst them is Sufyan ibn Uyayna, who said, I tried this for 50 years and it worked. Meaning, I tried being generous to my family and on the day of Ashura, and I noticed that Allah increased my wealth throughout the rest of the year. So I encourage this practice because it's a Sunni practice that is endorsed by all four of the madhahib al-arba'a, and it has a hadith. Some scholars, they deem it weak, and other scholars, they consider it strong. Okay? So that is related to the day of Ashura. So there's two things to do there: fasting, and number two, to also encourage generosity to the family specifically. And if a person wishes to be generous to other people, it's a good season to accumulate good deeds, inshallah. Anyways, last but not least, in this season, throughout the centuries, and even in our time still today, people are returning from Al-Hajj. Okay? Because we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that Al-Hajj ashhurun ma'lumat, that Hajj is specific months. Okay? And that those specific months, though they have come to pass, but now people are making their way back to their homes. And though we have very fast means of transportations which get us around pretty much all around the world really fast, but even though we have those means of transportation really fast here and there, even then, sometimes people till today, till our times, decide to remain after Hajj for a few weeks in Mecca. And till now, just actually this morning, I had messages from people in Mecca who had questions about their Hajj, about different things. Pilgrims still have to do Tawaf al-Wida' when they're leaving Mecca, for instance, and other such issues. So pilgrims are all heading back now. Okay? This is the season in which pilgrims are all coming back from Hajj. So it's a great season from that angle as well. People have gained a pious deed and they're going to be going back to their country, inshaAllah ta'ala, changed people. And the way we recognize that we have actually changed as pilgrims, perhaps a pilgrim will hear this as well. So the way we recognize that we've actually changed as pilgrims is the following. Because remember, the good Hajj, a pure Hajj, an acceptable Hajj, is a very high status to have within this life and the hereafter. Because the Prophet ﷺ told us of this. He said, Al-Hajjul Mabrur, laysa lahu jaza'un illa al-Jannah. That there is no jaza, there is no true recompense for a proper Hajj, for an acceptable Hajj, except that the person is granted Jannah. So this is a very high status that the person will be granted simply for doing this Hajj. But how do we ensure that our Hajj is proper? How do we ensure that our Hajj, inshaAllah ta'ala, has been accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal? Al-Hasan al-Basri explained this to us, and he said that the sign of an acceptable Hajj, and the sign of the fact that the person will be granted Jannah, is that he returns to his people and he has become ascetic in the dunya. He's not chasing after the dunya anymore, because he's seen the world before him. Millions of people gathered. He knows he knows what this world is all about, and that his small world, his little cocoon, his little community that he was in, that's not what the whole world is about. The world is much grander. All of these people are worshippers of Allah. So if he wishes to exceed, if he wishes to join in the race and actually make it somewhere, then he has to start worrying about the hereafter more than worrying about his dunya. So a person returns back no longer caring for the dunya. Remember, the person went, and perhaps he had a lot of money, and perhaps he had good clothing, perhaps he was wearing the best of very expensive watches and so on and so forth. But here he was before Allah, undressed from all of those things, and he was just wearing the ihram, right? So all of these things bring humility to a person and chase them away from the dunya and bring them closer to the hereafter. So you'll be zahidan fi dunya, raghiban fil akhirah, seeking the akhirah, the hereafter, and the hereafter alone. And how do we know that the person has actually been forgiven? Al-Hasan al-Basri tells us also. He says the sign of that is as such, that the person comes back and he has left all evil actions, or at least the majority of the evil actions. This doesn't mean the person will become infallible. This simply means that he will now have tawfiq, divine aid from Allah Azza wa Jal, to be able to avoid the evil that he was on prior to going for Hajj. You will have a substantial, a noticeable change within his life. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of the Hujjaj a Hajj about which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in Sahih Muslim, Al-Hajju yahdimu ma qablahu, that Hajj ends up breaking down all of the sins that were prior to it. And before we finish off, some of us may be saying, well, the Hajj did that for the people, but we didn't have that experience, right? What I want you to realize is that all 5 pillars of Islam are actually actions which expiate a person's sins if a person does it properly. How so? Firstly, La ilaha illallah, saying La ilaha illallah is the greatest of deeds, okay? Meaning that a person truly believing in these words and acting by these words, La ilaha illallah and Muhammadur Rasulullah, that is amongst the ways to enter Jannah, okay? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us of this about the person, for example, that's dying. He said, Man qala man kana akhiru kalami la ilaha illallah, whoever happens to have the last of his words, La ilaha illallah, he will enter into Jannah. Whoever says La ilaha illallah and he says it whilst he's truly believing in it, then this person will be forgiven for, and so on and so forth. So there's different traditions related to this, many traditions, right? In fact, even on the Day of Judgment, when the scales will be placed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the card which says La ilaha illallah, right? And the La ilaha illallah will be even more heavy than all of the sins on the other hand. So saying La ilaha illallah and truly believing in the fact that there's no God worthy of worship except Allah Azza wa Jal, there's no deed really a person can do that is greater than this. Then comes the prayers, and the Prophet told us of the prayers. He said that as-salawatul khams wal jumu'atu ila al-jumu'ah wa ramadan ila ramadan mukaffiratun lima baynahunna majtunibat al-kaba'ir. This is a hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that the 5 daily prayers, similarly praying between Jumu'ah and another Jumu'ah, like praying Jumu'ahs, and also the fast of Ramadan, doing that fast and then going to the next Ramadan and doing the fast of that Ramadan, all of them expiate the sins that happen to be between them. So if a person is continuously occupied in fulfilling these obligations, even if he didn't have the opportunity to do Hajj, inshallah, there's great reward in these and great opportunities to ensure that Allah expiates our sins, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, raises our status. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise our status, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the blessing of worshipping Him in this new year in a way that we hadn't worshipped before, rather in a way that will continue to get better as the years pass within our lives. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan for listening. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.